Welcome to week 3 of these Lent talks this year, 2025. Week 3 of Christ Beyond the Church, and we're looking at the reconciliation of all things. This is a phrase that comes from a passage in one of the letters of the Apostle Paul, which we will get to shortly. We're going to begin, though, with a short grounding and being present meditation. So just relax, be comfortable. Make sure your body is rested in a comfortable position so you don't have to focus on wriggling to get comfortable, shifting weight. Do that now. And then just breathe gently and keep your natural breathing rhythm. Close your eyes. Focus on the breath. Focus on your body rising and falling. Become aware of your body rising and falling as the breath flows into your body and out of your body. And when you're in a space of being rested, when you're focused on your breath and your body, become aware of the divine presence in this space. But start with the body, resting your body, focusing on the physical relaxation. Draw your mind then into the breath, flowing in and out of your body. And when you feel a good sense of relaxation, and you're totally aware of your body rising and falling as the breath flows in and out, then become aware of the divine presence saturating you and surrounding you. We'll just spend a few moments in that space. sense of peace and restfulness, or your focus back into being in this space. Well, it's wonderful to be here again online teaching for our Lent sessions. This is our third, as I said, Monday of Lent in our Christ Beyond the Church topics. And there's a passage in uh, Colossians that speaks of the work of the cross, of course, because that's the focus of the end of Lent, the culmination of our time of Lent is focusing on the work of the cross of Christ. And there's a passage in Colossians which talks about the work of Christ in a slightly different way to how we may have been led to believe that the work of the cross is really presented. We'll get to the passage in a moment. But first, I want to share with you the idea of the cross that I was given when I was young, when I was growing up in a fairly fundamental conservative evangelical church. You may recognize um, some of this idea from your own understanding. So I was led to believe that Jesus had to die on the cross to save me from my sin because God would punish sin by death, and if I had sin in me, then I would be eternal death. We're talking about the death of Zoe life rather than bios life, and not the physical death, but a spiritual death. And I would be sent to hell. Anybody who didn't have this covering of the cross would be sent to hell. And so I had to accept Jesus as my personal savior because the work of the cross was about Jesus saving me. And by accepting Jesus as my personal savior, I was then, I'd signed the docket, as it were. I ticked the box. I've got my, as it was actually presented to me as a young person, got my ticket to the bus to heaven. And so that's how the work of the cross is presented. It's known in a theological context as the substitutional atonement theology, that Jesus is my substitute and died in my place uh, to atone, to become one with, to become reconciled with that sense of God. So Jesus died in my place because death was necessary, and I would be dying otherwise to be able to get me to heaven. And this is Jesus as my personal savior, and I have to accept that as a personal relationship with Jesus to be able to get to heaven, to be saved, to get my ticket to the bus that goes to heaven. And that was how it was presented to me. I'm not going to go too much into where that came from, but just suffice it to say that actually, for the history of church, that's been the teaching of the cross for less than half of it, just the latter half of it, or just less than half. But before that, there seemed to be a greater balance um, of the work of the cross, it seems. From my study of early ecclesiastical history in the English and the Irish traditions, particularly, which is where my expertise is. That's where I have my thesis, my master's degree was on the kind of the Celtic Anglo-Saxon ideas and ecclesiology. So in that sense, in that period of time, for the first roughly 1200 years, the work of the cross was presented not in that one singular way of this substitutionary atonement theology, but in a balance of all of the things that Scripture says about the work of the cross. And one of those things is the reconciliation of all things. If you are connected to my social media accounts on Facebook and Instagram, I put a little reel up as an advert for this session today. And I started it with a joke. So for those of you who are not connected to social media, I didn't see that. I'll tell you the joke now. So it's an old joke, but I quite like some of the old jokes. So the Dalai Lama walks into a pizza place and says, "Can you make me one with everything?" Now, if you understand the concepts of Buddhism, that's a funny joke. Because the idea of becoming one with everything is a deep focus of the Buddhist meditation. To become one with all things is a big part of what the Buddhists are focused on. Um, but it's not just the Buddhists who have this idea of becoming one with everything. In fact, it is a thread that runs through a great deal of the mainstream and lesser stream uh, faith and spiritual traditions of history and the world. It is this idea that we can be deeply connected to all things through the divine presence, that we can become deeply woven into a oneness with all of the existence of everything, including the existence of the divine reality. We can become one with it all. And that's like the realization, the epiphany, enlightenment moment that Thomas Merton had standing at the corner of Fourth and Walnut many years ago, where he suddenly went, I suddenly realized that I loved all these people. I suddenly realized that I was one with them. And there is this real sense of a connection with the divine. And it comes through in Christianity of all things being reconciled back to the Creator. So, in all of these different faith traditions and ideas and beliefs, there is this sense of a separatedness between the Creator and the created. There is something that divides uh, us from each other, from the rest of creation, and from the divine. And there is an element of us needing to reconnect. Uh, and the different traditions have different ways of presenting this idea. But this is this one thread that there is a separation between us. We see ourselves as individuals and we are separate from the other creation. And we are separated from the divine reality. And we have to get back to that reconnection. Now, the Christian tradition has focused a great deal on just the reconciliation between us and God, the humans and God, which is why the substitutionary atonement theology is such a big thing. And it really got a push through the Protestant movement in the latter half of the last century, the last millennia. Um, so this idea of being reconnected with God and how you do that became a big thing. Now, the other faith traditions have maintained the idea that we need to be one with everything. And actually, when I say faith traditions, that includes actually Eastern Orthodox Christianity, because their focus isn't just about our personal relationship with God. It's about being reconnected with one another and being reconnected with all of creation and being reconnected with the divine reality. So it's really only Western Christianity, which is the one that has the biggest voice in the world, because it's the one that promotes itself the most in the world, particularly the Protestant movement, um, that has this idea of the substitutionary atonement. Other faith religions, Eastern Orthodoxy, and anybody who follows things like Celtic Christianity, which has become popular these days, um, and I do other teachings on that. You can discover that on my website. Um, Focuses in on this idea of the reconciliation of all things. And let me read you the passage from Colossians that the Apostle Paul writes to this church. Now, in most Bibles, it's the section in Colossians 1 entitled The Supremacy of Christ. And of course, we're talking here about the cosmic Christ. We're not talking about Jesus as the physical incarnation, as a historical figure. We're talking about the cosmic Christ. If you want to know the differentiation between those two, pop back and look at the YouTube channel and look at week 1, where I looked at Jesus and the Pharisees, Christ and the church. But the supremacy of Christ here in Colossians 1, he says this: He, that is the Christ, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him all things in heaven and earth were created, visible and invisible, thrones or dominions or rulers or powers. all things have been created through him and for him. This puts Christ at the very beginning, like John's gospel says, in the beginning was the Word. So this is the cosmic Christ outside of the incarnation. He himself is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. That is, he is the source of the reality of the physical human expression. He is the beginning and the firstborn from the dead. That is the risen Christ, so that he might come to have first place in everything. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell. That's an important statement. All the fullness of the divine dwelt in that incarnation of Jesus. And through him, God, remembering that this is everything about God is incarnate in Jesus, so himself, was pleased to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, by making peace through the blood of the cross. And then it goes on to talk about how we as humans, because he's talking to humans, were once estranged, once separated from the divine, and can be reconciled back into that. But this idea, verses 19 and 20 of Colossians 1, for in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, all the divine essence dwelt in that incarnation. And through that incarnation, the divine was pleased to reconcile back into that divine relationship all things. Whether on earth, that's the physical reality, or in heaven, the spiritual reality, by making peace through the blood of the cross. So it is a work of the cross, it is a work of the blood of the cross to reconcile all things back to the Creator, to draw everything back in. Now, there's a lot of aspects of what we need to do to enable ourselves to receive this reconciliation. As Paul says in other places, to work out our own salvation. That is not that the gift isn't given of freely, that we are drawn back in, but there is elements of how much we can reconnect, how we can reconnect, how we become one with that divine presence. But it isn't just about humans. It isn't just about us. Because Paul is talking to people, he goes on to talk about people. But it isn't just about humans. We flick back in our scriptures to the letter that Paul wrote to the Romans, Romans 8, verses 19 and a couple of verses onwards from there. It says the creation, the whole of creation, that is all the things that have been created, not just people, the whole of creation, for the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility. The creation has in itself, the whole creation, become separated from God, not by its own will, but by the will of one who subjected it. That is, again, focusing in on that humanity element, the anthropocentric view, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from the enslavement to decay, that is, a separation from the divine, and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God, back into the focus of people, because Paul was writing to people. We know that the whole creation has been groaning together as it suffers together the pains of labor. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly while we await for the adoption, that reconnection, for redemption of our physical reality, our bodies, it says here, our physical reality. So there is a sense here in this book of Romans that modern science is now understanding and expressing that the whole of creation, the whole of the living reality of creation, has this conscious awareness, all different to the conscious awareness of humans, The conscious awareness of the creator and its own separation from the creator. Now, we know from modern science that trees have a conscious awareness, plants have a conscious awareness. They talk to each other, they communicate things, they can recognize things. There's a wonderful TED talk about trees that talks about how a parent tree can recognize its own offspring in the forest around it. So if it's in a forest, if a tree has grown from another tree dropping its seed or its nut, then the tree that nut has come from recognizes that that tree there is one of its own offspring and actually will favor sending information about the goodness and nutrients in the soil to that tree before it sends it out to all the rest of the tree community that is standing around it. There is that level of conscious awareness in trees, and this is modern science. You can read this or listen to this in books and on YouTube. So there is this reality that science is now affirming that the Apostle Paul spoke about 2,000 years ago, that creation has a conscious awareness, and part of that awareness is its separation from the Creator. Now, both in Romans and Colossians, it refers to humanity having the moment of realization that there needs to be this reconnection, but the reconnection itself happens because of the work of the cross. So the reconnection has already happened. It is our realization and our awareness that allows us to live out the reality of the reconnection, to be reconciled in a real embodied way. It is our awareness and our understanding and our realization that now enables us to embody that as a reality. That's where the humanity element comes in. That's where our understanding comes in, because the rest of creation is just waiting. It knows this reconnection. It doesn't have to have a realization. Its awareness is already there with the relationship with the Creator. It understands and lives in the separation, and sits in a waiting context to reconnect. And this reconnection will come as most of the traditional spiritual realities and spiritual faith traditions, including Eastern Orthodoxy and even Western Christianity and its mystics, will teach. This sense of unification comes off theosis, the becoming one with the divine, can begin in this life but ends and comes to its completion when we are released from our physical selves and live in the spiritual reality of eternity. So that's when we become fully reconnected with that divine presence. And it's in that kind of process that the whole of creation that is reconciled back to God. And the interesting thing I have here, and it's questions that I'm going to pose for you to contemplate. I'm not going to give any answers to this. It's questions that I'm going to pose for your contemplation. Is when it says in Colossians that the reconciliation of all things includes those things of earth, as I said, the physical reality of life, and in heaven, and in the spiritual reality. Now, what in the heavens, what in the spiritual reality needs reconciling to God? What in the spiritual reality is separated from the divine reality? I imagine specific things have already sprung into mind. But the reconciliation is of all things on earth, which is what the Apostle Paul talks about in Romans, and in the heavens. What does that mean for the eternal reality? Maybe it doesn't matter to you whether what's reconciled. Maybe all that matters to you is you. Maybe even in the understanding of the cross and the teaching of the cross, not as substitutionary atonement theology, but in the reconciliation theology, which is where my emphasis it now lies. The reconciliation of all things, reconciliation theology, which are still focused on yourself. And it's all about you being reconciled to God. I think that the work of the cross to reconcile us to one another and to become one with creation is more important than just me. My reconciliation with the divine is a simultaneous act in my mind. This is what this passage speaks about in Colossians, a simultaneous act in my mind of my realization of becoming one with others, becoming one with all of creation. And that has a greater impact because it means that the work of the cross in its reconciliation theology isn't just about life after death. It isn't just about getting my bus ticket to heaven. It's about now. If my connection with you and all of humanity and all of creation is a work of the cross, then what does that mean about how I should treat other people and how I should treat all of the rest of creation? That's what I want to leave with you. I'm going to pause for you to have a time of contemplation on that idea of being reconciled with all things. So we'll have about 10, 15 minutes for you to have that sense of contemplation, and then we'll be able to have a discussion on that. So just pause and reflect on what does it mean if the work of the cross is about the reconciliation of all things? What does it mean for me in relation to God and the divine reality, but also to one another and to all of creation? We come to an end of our time of contemplation. I just share the screen for the virtual collection plate. These are free talks. There is no expectation or obligation to give, but if you would like to donate to the ongoing work of Waymark Ministries, so we can continue to run free events like this and others in person and have the ability to give discounts to people who can't afford to attend something like this, then please just use your smartphone's camera or a QR code app that you have to scan one of the QR codes on the screen, and that will go directly through to us and enable us to be able to do more free events, to be able to give discounts to people who can't afford it, and to enable us to just continue the work that we do. So just leave that up for a moment or two before we get into discussion. I'll pause the recording when we're discussing, and then I'll come back to the recording to give a closing thought. So just leave that up for one more moment before we get back and have a time of discussion. Yeah. So as we've said, um, this idea of being reconciled to God through all things is a fantastic realization that we can have. That actually the cross isn't just about saving me from hell. And in fact, what is that? The reconciliation of all things. It includes all things in heaven. That's a whole different conversation, as we've realized. Um, that yeah, this idea that actually our relationship with the earth is part of this reconciliation. How we treat the earth in our living days is part of this work of the cross. It's not just a secondary kind of eco-theology thing that we should be part of or not, but actually the reconciliation of all things, making us one with the earth, bringing us back into that symbiotic relationship with the earth and all of creation should make us treat the earth like we treat an extra part of our body or another part of our body, our arm or our leg or, a part of our body that's just a part of us. We're in a relationship with it, or at the very least, the kind of relationship that, the way you would treat another person you're close to and you love, the intimate relationships, your spouse, your children, your family, or very close friends, as he said. Yeah, just how we treat the earth, if this is reconciliation of all things, if the work of the cross was for all things, then how we should be really conscious, much deeper, much more transcendent than an eco-theology. It's a reality that we are one with these things, and it's our awareness that needs to change, and that we can live in that oneness with God, taking on that divine nature, as the Apostle Peter said, as I said, this idea of being one with the divine, really tapping into that inner divine nature. So it's been great to have this time with you today. And for those of you who are watching the YouTube link, great to see you. Next week, week 4, we are looking at, I'm just looking at my notes over here of what we're doing, the Prodigal Son and the Good Samaritan, subtitled Love Supersedes the Law, looking at how our religion and our religiosity as Christians might need to be superseded by an act and attitude of love. But more of that next week. Fantastic. Great to have you with us. Hope you have a wonderful week. Bless you.